Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're tackling something huge, something that honestly affects millions our country's ongoing struggle with reading. And just to set the stage, get this, 67% of our fourth graders are reading below grade level. 67%. And maybe the most shocking part, that number, it's barely budged in over 50 years. This isn't, just a school problem. It's bigger. It impacts kids' futures, their economic prospects, everything. It's a societal failure, really.
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
And, the conversation often gets stuck on phonics versus whole language, that whole debate. But what our sources are showing, what we're diving into today, is something else, something less talked about. This widespread parental disengagement. And yeah, even a level of indifference.
Indifference. That sounds harsh, but okay.
Well, it's complex, right? It's not just one thing. We're talking systemic barriers, yes, but also cultural changes. A lot of misinformation floating around, massive socioeconomic pressures, and sometimes, frankly, a kind of apathy that just lets this crisis roll on year after year.
Okay, so if you want to get past the headlines and really understand this silent crisis, understand why parents who you'd think would be screaming from the rooftops often aren't mobilizing effectively. Well, you're in the right place. Let's dig in. That statistic, 67% below grade level. And for 50 years, just pause and think about what that actually means. Millions and millions of kids basically set up for academic and, let's be honest, economic struggles. The sheer scale, when you let it sink in, it's just staggering.
Confirmed by the NABEP scores, the nation's report card, year after year.
It really is staggering. And when we looked into why parents aren't, storming the school boards about this specific issue, one really surprising thing popped up, this huge knowledge gap around the reading wars themselves. Most parents, honestly, they don't understand the core debate between phonics and whole language. They trust the school, trust the experts.
Right, they assume the school knows best. Exactly. They don't realize that how reading is taught directly impacts whether their kid succeeds or struggles. And all the jargon and, frankly, misinformation out there just adds to the confusion. It makes it hard to even know what to ask.
Yeah, I can see that. Which creates this pressure vacuum you mentioned. Like, parents might be frustrated individually, maybe complaining to each other. But you don't see these big organized movements demanding specific evidence-based reading instruction like systematic phonics the way you see for, say, school funding or other issues. It's oddly quiet on this front.
It is remarkably quiet. And that quietness leads us right into the anatomy of this indifference we're talking about. One pattern that kept coming up in the sources, and it's unsettling, is what we're calling the school is daycare syndrome.
School is daycare. Okay, unpack that.
It means a significant chunk of parents, and this isn't about one demographic. It cuts across. They seem to view school mainly as, childcare. The key things are, is my kid safe? Are they supervised? Fed? Okay, good. The academic side, the actual learning of something complex like reading, it just seems to be a lower priority.
Wow. Why, though? What drives that?
It's often rooted in necessity. Maybe parents are working multiple jobs, crazy shifts, there's just no bandwidth left. Or maybe they had bad experiences with school themselves, They're disillusioned. For some, it really is just about survival mode. Academic excellence feels like a luxury they can't afford to focus on. It's not a judgment, it's just the reality for them.
That's a tough reality. And I guess that view could lead to something else you found. This idea that teaching is the school's job, not mine.
Precisely. That abdication of responsibility is incredibly common. Parents feel they aren't qualified to help, or they're just too swamped, or they genuinely think, my job is getting them to school. The rest is up to the teachers. Mm-hmm. So homework help becomes this grudging chore, if it happens at all. Yeah. And forget diving deep into how reading is being taught. That feels like crossing a line where it's just not on their radar.
And how does that show up practically?
Well, you see it in things like low turnout for parent-teacher conferences, especially the ones purely about academics. You see minimal checking of homework or tracking if their child is actually reading at home. And definitely a reluctance to push for specific teaching methods, even if the kid is clearly falling behind. It's very hands-off.
Okay, so if you're hands-off, what comes next? Does that lead to just assuming everything's fine?
Yeah, often it leads straight into what the sources call complacency and misplaced trust. The guiding principle becomes, no news is good news. If the school isn't calling with problems, they figure the kid must be doing okay. They trust the report card, even if it's vague or maybe a bit inflated. They trust the teacher saying, they're trying hard.
Without digging deeper into what on track actually means at that grade level.
Exactly. They don't look for the hard data. There's this underlying trust. They're professionals. They've got this, which, shields them from asking tougher questions.
And that can create a dangerous situation, right? This illusion of progress.
Oh, absolutely. It's a huge trap. In those early grades, K1, maybe 2, kids can look like they're reading. Yeah. They use picture clues, they memorize some sight words. Parents see them reading a simple book and think, great, they've got it.
But they haven't actually learned to decode.
Not necessarily, no. They haven't learned the systematic phonics, how to sound out unfamiliar words. Then boom, they hit 3rd or 4th grade. The pictures disappear, the words get harder, the texts get longer. And suddenly they hit a wall. They can't do it. And by then, the parents feel completely blindsided and helpless. Like, where did this come from? The gap seems too big to fix.
And layered on top of all this, for so many families, there's just this sheer grind of daily survival, isn't there?
Absolutely. If you're worried about rent or healthcare or just putting food on the table, the abstract problem of national reading scores or the specific details of phonics instruction, it's just distant noise. It's out of sight, out of mind. All their energy, all their focus has to go to immediate needs. Engaging deeply with the school curriculum is, frankly, a luxury.
That makes sense. But what about parents who aren't in that extreme survival mode? Do they see the problem?
Well, that's where this cognitive dissonance thing seems to come in. Even if parents are aware, maybe they read an article or see a news report about the national crisis, they often think, yeah, it's bad out there, but my kid seems fine. They see their child as the exception, which again removes any sense of personal urgency to investigate or push for change.
And then there's the intimidation factor, feeling powerless against the system.
Yes, that's huge. Helplessness, intimidation, and system distrust.
Many parents, especially if they didn't have great school experiences themselves or maybe didn't finish high school, they feel genuinely intimidated by principals, by the whole school structure. They don't know how to advocate, what questions to ask, who to talk to. They worry about being labeled a difficult parent, Yeah. Or they just fundamentally believe the system is too big, too bureaucratic, and their voice won't make a difference anyway.
And that distrust, does it play out differently across different communities? You mentioned race earlier.
It does, and this is critical. For many Black, Indigenous, and Latino parents, there's a deep-seated distrust rooted in historical and sadly ongoing systemic racism within schools. They might see disproportionate discipline, lower expectations, lack of cultural understanding from staff. So pushing back, advocating, it can feel not just futile, but actually risky. Like it could backfire on their child. And this can exist right alongside incredibly high hopes and dreams for their children's education. It's a really painful conflict for many families.
That's a really important point, and we absolutely need to stress, like the sources do, that these are trends, not stereotypes. There's huge variation within every single group. Absolutely crucial. Avoid stereotypes at all costs. But understanding the general patterns helps explain the bigger picture. For instance, with Black parents, you often find, as I said, really high educational aspirations. Education is seen as vital, a tool for overcoming barriers. But that's often paired with that deep distrust we talked about because of negative experiences with discrimination or unfair discipline. So you might see either a withdrawal, a kind of disillusioned disengagement, or, on the flip side, incredibly fierce, hypervigilant advocacy. They become fighters for their kids.
Okay. And Latino parents.
With Latino parents, sources often point to a strong cultural value of respect for teachers and authority figures. This can sometimes mean they're less likely to question the school's methods directly. Plus, very practically, language barriers can be a massive hurdle to understanding things like reading instruction debates or school reports. There's generally a very high value placed on education, but work demands long hours, less flexibility, and maybe less familiarity of navigating the U.S. school system can make active engagement really difficult.
What about white parents? That seems like it would be a very diverse group.
Extremely diverse. You see affluent, highly educated white parents who can be very engaged, very demanding. They might be the ones organizing to get specific phonics programs into their district, often focused on their kids' advantage, perhaps. But then you have working class or lower income white parents who might face similar economic stresses and exhibit similar patterns of disengagement as other groups in that situation. Or sometimes, particularly in certain areas, you might find a distrust of government schools driven more by political ideology. So it really varies.
And Asian parents, there's often a stereotype there about intense focus on academics.
Right, the model minority stereotype, which can be misleading. Yes, there's often intense pressure for academic achievement in many Asian communities, but that focus might be almost entirely on the outcomes, grades, test scores, getting into good colleges. It doesn't always translate into a deep understanding or questioning of how reading is being taught in those crucial early years. Is it phonics based? Is it something else? That might not be the focus. And like some Latino communities, a cultural emphasis on respecting authority might make some parents less inclined to challenge teachers or administrators directly.
So beyond those cultural nuances, there are just plain systemic barriers that hit everyone.
Oh, absolutely. These cut across all demographics. Think about time poverty.
Yeah.
Parents working 2-3 jobs, single parents juggling everything, long commutes, eating into family time. There's just no time or energy left for deep school engagement.
Makes sense. What else?
Big knowledge gaps. Some parents struggle with literacy themselves. Maybe they didn't get good reading instruction. How can they help their child if they lack the skills or confidence? Or they just don't know the developmental milestones. They don't know what to look for, what's normal at age 6 versus age 8.
And the schools themselves, are they helping or hindering engagement?
Often hindering, sadly.
Yeah.
We see major school communication failures. Reports home are full of jargon, unclear language. They don't flag risks early or clearly enough. Developing nicely doesn't tell a parent their child is actually below grade level. And real opportunities for parents to give meaningful input on curriculum or instruction, they're often rare or just feel like lip service.
And doesn't the blame sometimes get shifted unfairly onto parents?
Yes, that's the parent blame narrative. You hear it all the time. Well, if parents would just read to their kids more.
Mm-hmm.
And while reading at home is great, it shifts the focus away from whether the school is using effective, evidence-based instruction during the school day. It makes parents feel blamed and defensive, leading them to pull back, not lean in.
And finally, just the sheer confusion of it all.
Exactly. Misinformation and complexity. The reading wars have been confusing for decades, sometimes deliberately obscured by curriculum publishers or ed schools. Parents get bombarded with conflicting advice online, from friends, even from teachers sometimes. It's incredibly hard to figure out who or what to trust.
Okay, this is painting a pretty bleak picture of inaction, but your sources also faced some, let's say, controversial truths head on, things that might be uncomfortable to talk about.
They did. And it's important to acknowledge these, even if you're uncomfortable. One is the reality that, for some parents, other things genuinely seem to take priority over academics. Intense focus on sports, tons of extracurriculars, social media, monitoring reading progress just falls down the list. Another tough one. Some parents, maybe because of their own bad experiences in school, have internalized really low expectations. They project that onto their kids. Well, I wasn't good at school, so I don't expect my kid to be either. It's heartbreaking, but it happens.
Yeah, it is heartbreaking.
Then there's the stark reality we touched on earlier. For a minority, school's primary value is as free, safe childcare. Academic outcomes are genuinely secondary. And finally, this concept of learned helplessness. After years of trying to navigate the bureaucracy, feeling ignored, seeing nothing change, some parents just give up. They develop genuine apathy because they feel like nothing they do matters. Advocacy feels pointless.
Right, and this is where that crucial distinction comes in, isn't it? Separating that learned helplessness or genuine apathy from the parents who do care, maybe deeply, but just feel stuck.
Exactly. That's critical. We have to distinguish true indifference from the parents who care but can't. So many parents do care intensely. They desperately want their kids to succeed, but they're exhausted by just surviving day to day. They're confused by the jargon and the debates. They feel intimidated by the school system. They don't have the knowledge or the tools to fight effectively. Maybe they're struggling with their own reading. Lumping them in with parents who truly don't prioritize education is unfair and unproductive. Understanding this difference is key to finding solutions.
Okay, so if we understand the problem, the indifference, the helplessness, the barriers, what about pathways forward? How do we disrupt this cycle?
Well, the sources point to several potential levers for change. First and foremost, radical transparency. Schools have to start providing crystal clear, early, easy to understand data on every single child's reading progress. Use objective measures. State plainly, your child is at grade level or your child is at risk. No more hiding the ball with vague language.
So just tell parents the truth, clearly and early.
Yes. Second, we need to actively work on demystifying instruction. We need major parent education campaigns explaining how reading actually works, why phonics is foundational, what effective instruction looks like, and simple things parents can do to support it. And this needs to be in plain language, accessible formats, videos, workshops, not just dense flyers sent home.
Make it understandable for everyone. Got it.
Third, lowering advocacy barriers. Make it easier for parents to ask for and demand evidence-based instruction. This could mean training parent advocates, creating clear pathways for requests within the school system, maybe even using existing federal laws like ERITAs, the Every Student Succeeds Act, which actually has provisions for parent engagement that often go underutilized.
So empower parents to ask for what works.
Right. Fourth, community-based solutions. Don't just expect parents to come to the school building during work hours. Partner with trusted places where parents already are: community centers, libraries, churches, workplaces. Maybe deliver information and support there. Meet them where they are.
That makes a lot of sense. What else?
Fifth is huge: addressing root causes. If parents are struggling with literacy themselves, offer adult literacy support. If they're crushed by economic stress, connect them with wraparound services. Build genuine partnerships based on respect, not blame. Sixth, maybe think about empowering student voice. Teach kids themselves, as they get older, how to recognize when they're struggling and how to ask for help. I don't understand these sounds. This book isn't making sense. Give them the language to advocate for themselves. And finally, seventh, holding systems accountable. The media, policymakers. The focus needs to shift. Stop the knee-jerk parent blaming. Focus instead on the systemic failures, the lack of implementation of proven methods like the science of reading, and hold districts and states accountable for fixing the system. So as we wrap up this deep dive, it feels clear that parental indifference, or maybe disengagement is a better word, it's not the only reason for the reading crisis.
Definitely not the only reason. Teacher training, curriculum choices, school funding, they all play a huge role.
Right. But this parental piece, it's a really significant kind of corrosive factor that maybe doesn't get talked about enough. It's an accelerant to the problem. It absolutely is. Yeah. And as we've discussed, this disengagement, this indifference, it's forged in this really tough mix of system failures, economic hardship, bad information, and sometimes just where parents place their priorities. And while we see different nuances across racial and cultural groups, that core problem, the lack of a loud, sustained, informed, collective parent demand for what actually works in reading that cuts across all demographics.
So the final thought for you listening, what do we do with this? Breaking this cycle seems to mean facing some pretty uncomfortable truths about parents' roles, sure, but also about societal priorities and the systems we've built. And at the same time, we have to dismantle those barriers that stop even the parents who care the most from being effective advocates. So maybe the question is, what role can you play? How can you acknowledge this complex reality, maybe challenge some assumptions, and act even in small ways to change the story for the next generation? Something to think about.